Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the iThrive series. In this episode, we're going to be discussing your vision plans, and we're going to be talking about ways to make sure you're maximizing your benefits with each plan.
So we know that frame revenue is very important in general, but it's even more important when it comes to vision plans. How can ECPs maximize their revenue with vision plan patients?
And, this is when we talk about vision plans, this is the one area I always say that can make or break your bottom line. You've got to know the plans. You need to know, are our office or our staff members, charging the right amount for each plan. You've got to know the benefits. You've got to know how to calculate the copays. You've got to make sure that, we're getting the most benefit out of that plan, and our patients getting the most benefits out of that plan. You've really got to find ways to spot check, in a sense, to know that some of your staff members are charging the right thing. So Jay, I'm going to kind of ask you, what were some ways that you did as far as spot checking?
Well, one of my favorite ways, especially traveling around the country and visiting so many practices, let alone my own practice at the time, I'd always make a beeline for the lab. I'd pull down 10 trays out of the lab, just random picks. They'd be all different plans on all different types of jobs. I'd pull down 10 trays from the pickup section of jobs waiting to be picked up. And I would sit down and literally cost out those 20 jobs. And, in the beginning it was a little slow, but after a while you do really get quick with it. And, in a half hour, and certainly in less than an hour, I could pretty much judge what was going on in the practice. Were we charging the right co-payments? What products we were selling? What frames were going with which lenses? Which plans we were seeing? So, that was like my time to really touch base with the practice. So I always think that somebody in the practice should have the designated responsibility of doing some form of those spot checks. And it shouldn't be, hey, I see what you're doing, and walk away. You literally should be costing it out. Ron, in your practice, you had a designated person for that?
Yeah, my lead optician was really good about that. For one thing, he had a piece of the action, so he had some skin in the game. But,
Right.
He would regularly spot check the vision plan patients to see that they were billed out correctly and that things were done. And I would hear him, because my office was adjacent to the optical, I would hear him talking to other staff members and say, hey, you didn't do this right on Mrs. Jones. And he would also converse with the front desk, and, the person at the lead there would be watching for it as well.
Yeah,
It worked out well.
How many times have we seen patients be extremely well rewarded? And what I mean by that is, listen, what you said is right. It needs to be a win-win for everybody. We want to make sure the patient gets everything entitled to. We want to make sure the patient's happy. We want to make sure the patient is aware of everything they're entitled to. At the same token, I'm not going to be bashful about saying we need to generate a profit. Otherwise, we won't be here tomorrow to help the next patient, right? So
Right.
all those things really play well into each other. But, one of the critical areas that I have found that is always of concern is onboarding new folks. And, plans are so complex. There is so much to learn about each one, and making sure we're collecting the co-payments, charging the right fees, calculating the frame formularies correctly. For me, every practice needs a playbook, so to speak,
Exactly.
on how are they going to bring people on, how are they going to make sure they're doing it right, how are they going to create a situation where their team can succeed, versus, hey, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, and you're really just smacking them on the head every time they do something wrong. Instead of setting them up for success, we set them up for failure. So, that's a critical component of being successful and profitable, and increasing your cash flow, and making sure you have the right EBITDA.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have a procedural manual for everybody, and you need to keep it up to date. And, the doc doesn't have to do it all. You can have the people that are well-versed do it, and then the doc looks it over and okays it. But it's really an important thing for onboarding, as you say.
That's huge.
And, when we're thinking about, tracking, and that was part of this, is how to kind of create some action plans. This is a huge piece of it. Our vision plans can make or break our bottom line. And, you can uncover your opportunities just by, knowing your copays, knowing what to charge, what plans are out there, that is where the opportunities are at. Going to kind of give you an example here of how we could, think about tracking something like that. And, we can track it simply, I'm kind of going back to the frames again, since we were kind of left off with frames before, we sold 230 frames. We can see that 88 of those frames went to a VSP patient. That means 38% of the time you sell a frame, a VSP person's buying it. I think it's pretty critical that we know VSP. Even if, I know you guys were kind of talking a little bit about how, we were spot checking and things like that. If you find some errors, reach out to the plans. If your staff really needs to know how to calculate an overage, contact that plan. I'm sure they've got some need help videos and things like that that can really make sure everybody's on the right page. But
Patty, I love this screen, and it affords us so many different vantage points, right? So if you jump down to patients' own frames and look at VSP, and you see 18 VSP patients use their own frames, hey, let's find out what happened. Did they have an entitlement? Did we not have what they needed? What went on? Or if you jump over to $0 frames, and we see 30 VSP patients and 6 IMED patients, literally had no out-of-pocket on frames. Well, what did we show them? What kind of conversations have? Did they really understand the quality of products they were getting? But then you take this screen to the next level and you break it down by staff, and that's just like mind-blowing on how to really impact the business, right? So then you could see by staff member, who's your rock stars? Who's the folks that need a little bit more help? And how do you then, not how, but then you're able to work with your team and say, okay, this one's doing fantastic. This one needs a little help. Let's work together and let's get some learning outcomes going on here. So I love the fact that we not only could see how we're doing by plan, we could also see how we're doing by staff, because we as leaders and managers of our business, the biggest difficulty we have is this line of sight that we need in order to understand how to be laser focused, how not to waste our time doing things that really don't help our business, and to work with the people that need our help and be focused on that. So that's the beauty of this, that it allows us to say, okay, I know who I need to help today. And that's why I love these dashboards.
Well, and when we kind of bring it back around, to our P&L, and we were talking about revenues, this is key. I always say by staff is where we can uncover our training. Who in the office needs training? Does somebody have more patients on frames than another? It's the conversation. By plan is where I always say we can uncover our opportunities. If we kind of go back to that revenue piece of it again, let's look at private pay right here with I know you mentioned vision plans, but private pay is a pan when you think about it. We had 33 private pay patients use their own frame in 1 month. If we reduce that by 10, look, on average, our private pay patients are paying $104. There's $1,000 in revenue.
It's huge. And if you look at that there were 66 folks that use their own frames and 101 folks that have $0 frames, which is 167 units. And if you just take the average frame sale of $110, well, that adds up to over $18,000 in revenue opportunity. Now, I'm not going to say you're going to capture the whole 18,000, but what if you captured 5,000, 6,000, 7,000? That's not an unrealistic number. And, and you multiply that on a monthly basis. Let's say you captured $5,000 a month for the course of a year. Well, that's an extra $60,000. I mean, it adds up quick. That's why this information is so important. And this is clearly how it's going to impact people's EBITDA.
Exactly.
And it could be just a few words that one person's saying differently. Their attitude and their body language and just the way they present it can make a huge difference. So I always had my lead optician share his tools, if you will, with the other members and really help them up their game.
Yeah, I've literally, and I laugh about it, but I think I'm actually crying about it when I think about some of the experiences of being in the field. I've literally heard folks say, "You're probably not going to shop for a frame today, right?" I'm like, "Oh my God." Or, you know what? You hardly have any change in your prescription, so you could probably just go. You don't need anything today, right? And I'm like, Oh my God. So, much to what you just said, Ron, it is so important to have meaningful, thoughtful language and not to be presumptuous as to what the patient's needs are, and to just, and I say it over and over, make sure your patients always know what they're entitled to. Make
Mhm.
sure, and we use the word contributes. And dear friend, Dr. Mark Wright, when we're all lecturing together, we all try to use the word contributes. I'll say that I came up with the word contributes, but I think it's actually Dr. Mark Wright who did. But that being said, it's a great word. Your plan contributes towards everything you need. It doesn't say everything's free. It means it contributes towards it. So just these little words,
Right.
that the Mark Wrights and Mark Hintons and all those great folks out there that are teaching us how to communicate with patients use, just these meaningful words are so important to change the results.
Exactly. And that's huge in your revenue. And when we think about our frames, I'm going to just kind of bring it back to here. It's small changes. I mean, it doesn't take every last thing. Do we need that $16,000, or is it okay to have 5,000? It is okay. And small changes can do that. And, back to, we were talking about how the things we see the most as far as, working with different offices and things like that, you can now kind of understand why frames are usually the one area that we can hone in on the most, because this is, number one, it's our largest financial investment. We've already determined that, and it can get out of control the quickest. And these are some of the ways we're talking about how it can get out of control. So the two things that you really want to kind of monitor here, really, is these patients on frames and the $0 frames. We had 101 times that the patient got the free frame, and this is in a month. So, if we could reduce, even 25 of them, could we take baby steps and kind of reduce things down? So when you're thinking about tracking, you may want to think about, putting some plans in place that are, smaller steps. I call it baby steps, and kind of work your way and celebrate when you reach those goals all along the way. But there's one more key piece here with our $0 frames. And I always like to bring Jay in about this, because Jay, if we're going to be doing $0 frames, what kind of frames do we need to be using?
Well, HMPs, right? So we love our high margin product, and I've been a big advocate of making sure that our board management mix encompasses products that we're seeing significantly higher discounts on, so that we can make up the margin on those frames. And there's so many great programs from so many companies today. Where back in the day, if you got 5 or 8 or 10% off on frames, you were lucky. But now there's opportunities to get 20, 30, 40% off on frames. And, when you're incorporating strategies like that, you're definitely going to end up with more profit. And a lot of those companies have reward programs. So not only do you get this 20, 30, 40% off on frames, you're also tacking on to whatever else other business you're doing with these companies, and they combine it into rewards programs. You end up with rebates, you end up with better deals. So there's an element of less is more. We don't need to have 30 different frame vendors. We can think through our board management strategies in a little bit simpler way. We can go deeper with some of our vendors and expand the board management strategies, and gain those rewards. So you really have to weigh out who you're giving your business to, and how you're taking advantage of those vendor programs. And the extra margin that'll come out of that is huge. High margin product is a necessity in our business.
Yeah, when we think about that, I always say, if you're going to have free frames, we don't want to be giving away frames that we had to pay $75 for. We need to be giving
100%.
away frames that we paid $10 for. So
Yep.
it's a huge difference. Now, I'm going to add one more piece to this. It's not just about the products here, our frames and our lenses and our contacts. It's also about the exams. So,
Yeah.
medical exams versus routine exams. Tell me how you guys did that.
Well, you really need to make a distinction there between the two, and your staff has to understand the difference, and your patients have to understand the difference. What you don't want to be doing is having a patient in for their annual VSP exam and doing a visual field on them for that glaucoma patient in this case. What you want to do is do their routine exam on one day and then have them back on another day to do their visual field, and also have a problem-focused medical visit. And there's some benefits all around on this. Number one, it's actually better care for the patient because you're totally focused on their glaucoma when they come back for that separate visit. Secondly, it's better for your bottom line. And it also helps with your schedule because things run more smoothly when you've got several of the same type of exam together. So I always did a block of routine exams and then a block of medical visits. Just kept things on a rhythm through the office and things flowed more smoothly.
It's interesting that, and that flow is so critical to everything that goes on. When I've spent so much time helping design practices, and I literally count the number of steps it takes for one of our staff members to get to the next station, and I've seen practices that are so big that there are people working in the back, and people in the building don't even know they're there, right? Because the practice itself is like a city, which actually increases our labor. But so that flow is important. Your patient experience in that flow, and how much time they spend at each station and who's talking with them, all of that contributes to those final results. How they're being manhandled, so to speak, how many times they're being passed from person to person. All of these things influence the results. And at the end of the day, much to what we've talked about before is the fact that everybody in that lineup, everybody that has a touch point with the patient has an opportunity to share their excitement about the practice, their excitement about the amazing technologies we have and why they're so important and why the patient should take advantage of the great technologies, their excitement about the different product lines that might have come in, so that even if the patient is not there specifically in a need of a pair of eyeglasses or maybe in a contact lenses or whatever the case may be, we could still share with the patient, hey, just excited to share this technology with you, take care of you today. Also excited to let you know about these great new frame lines we got in. And whether you're shopping for a frame or not, you should really just spend a moment and go check them out, so that you have them in your mind for next time. Plant the seeds. And I always stress the word excited. I always relate that to the hospitality industry. When someone comes up to your table and says, "Oh, I'm so excited about the menu tonight. Let me tell you how it was prepared," and they tell you about how the chef did this and the wine this and the pasta this and by the time they get done, even if you don't eat that food, you order it because you got as excited as the person that was talking about it. You said, "Okay, let's give it a try."
Yeah, in a lot of practices, the doc and the techs and the people at the front desk, they don't really know what's going on with frames in the optical. And so in our staff meetings, we would usually take a few minutes and just talk about a new frame line and show the benefits of some of the nicer frames that we were putting out for patients.
Yeah, and I love that. I love working into some practices. They have staffed picks, and every member of the staff on a weekly or monthly basis will pick a fun frame, and they'll take a picture with the frame on it, and they'll have a shelf area which has a picture of every staff member wearing one of their fun frames, right? And it's just staff picks, because everybody loves, because that's a very social way of saying, here's what we love. And some of them look goofy and some of them look professional. It doesn't matter. But staff picks is a fun way. It's also a great way of making sure every member of the staff, regardless of their role in the staff, is in the game, so to speak, is involved with these new product lines, these new styles. So that's just a fun way of doing exactly what you said.
And when we kind of go back to putting the pen to the paper, as we usually say, in this scenario, we can see that, we had 193 routine type exams. That means we had quite a bit more down through here that were in the office. And what you're saying is there's no reason why these people can't come to the optical, or at least the technicians kind of talk about it. Or like you were saying, staff picks, there's so many different things. Even though they come in for a medical exam, they could still be, making purchases. That's what
I love this,
about.
Patty. At the bottom of this, it shows the contact lens check and mid-year checkup, and it shows medical only. So you had 114 patients coming to the practice that I would bet never made it to the optical, and I would bet that 99% sure nobody ever had a conversation with them about anything new happening at the practice, right? They were there, they got their test, they went home. That's 114 opportunities to share your excitement about the practice, your excitement about technology, your excitement about new arrivals. And so there's just opportunity everywhere. If we, pick up these opportunities, again, increase revenue, increase cash flow, increase EBITDA.
And you can see how vision plans, make a huge difference in the practice. It's not just one particular thing as far as frames. It's frames, it's lenses, it's exams, it's contacts, it's every touch point in the practice makes a difference with your vision plans and your bottom line. You've got to know the plans.